Lesson of the day, do not leave your typewriter at Taylor Swift's apartment because she will hold a grudge and write an entire album about it. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I want to talk about Taylor Swift's new album, The Tortured Poets Department. I've actually had a lot of requests that people wanted me to do like an update on the Taylor-Travis relationship. I have a couple videos diving into that relationship and talking about it, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. I'm going to talk about Taylor Swift's album. I'll probably go off on a lot of tangents, and this is a long album. Before I dive into this, a few disclaimers. For one, when I talk about celebrities or, any kind of celebrity culture, public figures, I am solely basing my observations on their public personas. I don't know these people personally, as much as I know that a lot of people feel like they know people like, say, Taylor, because she is so open and vulnerable in a lot of her music. A lot of people start to think that they know her and they know everything about her. I'm not claiming to know anything about Taylor. I'm simply making observations based on the information given to the public. I don't know what any of these celebrities are like behind closed doors. In reality, for the most part, I'm betting most of you don't either. And I do think that's just a good time to remind you that, like, while we do know a lot about some people who are more open about their lives, we have to take everything with a grain of salt, and we also have to understand that celebrities are sharing with us the image that they want us to see. We don't know what they're like behind closed doors. I actually had a lot of people in the videos I've made about Taylor in the past. I've had some people who were obviously very anti-Taylor who felt like they needed to say that, Taylor's a narcissist, or Taylor's a horrible person, or, Taylor's just behind closed doors. I don't know. My guess is most of you probably don't really know what she's like behind closed doors either. I will point out when I do think that somebody is not being genuine, but at the end of the day, it's really about the persona. I also want to point out I'm not a music critic by any means, so I'm not going to be talking about Taylor's album in terms of musicality or anything like that. I know what music I like and I know what music I don't like, and I might give some opinions here or there, but I'm going to talk about them more in terms of energetics and a little bit more about what we can learn from some of these things that we can translate into our everyday life. Because as Taylor said when she released the album isn't hers anymore, it's now ours, which in reality is what all art is meant to be. There's an artist who creates something, a piece of music or even a whole album, or some kind of visual art, a painting, a sculpture, something. And the artist probably put a lot of themselves and their own experience into that. However, as soon as you share that art with someone else or even the whole world, it's actually about how that art makes the individual feel, not necessarily the artist. Now, that's not to say that you can't ask yourself, like, oh, I wonder what this artist was thinking when they created this, or I wonder who was the muse or who was the inspiration or things like that. But it's actually more about your experience with the art. And I have noticed, and this is kind of the first tangent I think I want to go on, is I have noticed that we get so focused on the celebrities and their lives that we've actually taken our own personal experience out of the art. And I'm starting to see people pick up on that and maybe bring it back to their interpretation of the art. Like, I've seen some people online, there's a little trend that's starting as of now, I hope it keeps going, of people saying, like, stop asking, is this song about Matty? Is this song about Joe? Like, this song is about, I don't know, the guy that ruined college for me, or the guy that ghosted me after, I told him I loved him, or something, whatever thing. Because in reality, yes, Taylor probably wrote these songs based on her own personal experience with, whoever was in her life at the time, but these songs are really meant for you to tap into and take from them what you feel like you resonate with, and to connect with them for your own personal self and your own personal life. And we've gotten away from that to a certain extent, getting obsessed with like what the meaning is for the artist, when in reality it's not really about that. It's about how we interpret it. I'll use, for example, the song I Will Always Love You, which was originally written by Dolly Parton, was actually written by Dolly Parton for a mentor that she had, that she was kind of moving on from, and she kind of like, was leaving to go and do her own thing. It was not intended to be a romantic love song. It was really meant as like a thank you for all you've done for me kind of a song. And that was Dolly's version of I Will Always Love You. And then Whitney Houston took that song, and because it was associated with The Bodyguard, which was a love story, I actually have a breakdown of the movie The Bodyguard if you want to look into that. But when Whitney Houston sang it, it felt very much like it was about like a love, like a love that just couldn't be, kind of that, almost like a Romeo and Juliet, like they were star-crossed lovers but just couldn't be together for some reason, kind of a a feeling to it. It was the same song. It was just presented differently. And it doesn't really matter what the original idea of the song was. It's how we interpret it. I'm not saying if you kind of want to dive into Taylor Swift's dating life and you want to analyze it and you want to get into that, it can be a fun escape. I mean, I would advise you not to spend too much time going down that rabbit hole, because it oftentimes can become a distraction from things that you really should be facing in your own life and prioritizing yourself. But you know, I mean, we all kind of like a little gossip here and there, so it's not inherently terrible to look into who was the inspiration for what. But at the end of the day, that's really just a distraction. At the end of the day, you can listen to the music, you can enjoy the music, but it's really more about how it connects to you. I just find it strange because we are living in a very selfish time period where people often think about themselves first, but yet when it comes to things like art, we tend to project that onto other people and we don't tend to actually look internally at ourselves. Even though we're kind of living in a very self-centered time, we've also never become more disconnected from our inner selves than we have now. So whether you love or hate Taylor's album is totally irrelevant. If you are going to listen to it, I would encourage you to listen to it more from the perspective of like, how does this make me feel? And like, do I connect to it? Do I not connect to it? Do I resonate with it? Do I not? Is this just a fun song I want to dance to and sing along with, but I don't really have a connection with? Or like, is this bringing up a feeling for me of something that I've experienced or not, or something? Pay attention to how you experience it and less about like, oh, well, did she write this about this person because this person did this? And like, I think sometimes when you start diving too much into like picking things apart, you can ruin some of the enjoyment. I'm going to analyze the album, generally speaking, based on energetics, mostly masculine and feminine energies, and I have a lot of videos diving into masculine and feminine energy, so I'm not going to get too deep into this, but I do want to, in case you're new to my channel, I do want to give just a little brief summary of what I mean when I talk about masculine and feminine energies, because it gets very misinterpreted oftentimes. When I talk about masculine and feminine energies, I'm not talking about like the superficial ideas of what is like manly or what is girly. I'm talking about energetics, the yin and the yang of things, like the sort of the polarities of masculine and feminine. And we all contain both energies, but we all have a core energy that's the one we're most ourselves in. Most women are going to be naturally feminine at their core, and most men are going to be naturally masculine at their core. And we can be in wounded versions of either of these energies. So men can have wounded masculine or wounded feminine, and women can have wounded masculine or wounded feminine. And I also want to point out that these woundings, these energies, whether you're in a masculine or feminine or wounded masculine or wounded feminine, like this is not like a permanent state. This is not something that like you're like, okay, I'm doing this, so I must just be fully in my wounded feminine. These things are always fluid. We're always changing. You could go from being, you know, say you're in like a triggered moment and you're in this argument and like your wounding is coming out. You can go from being in your wounded masculine to your wounded feminine just in the course of one argument, or just, you know, one experience. Like, you can be in these moments and have this stuff within you. It's not like an absolute state. And if you find yourself, say for example, being in a very, say, wounded feminine state, it's not permanent. Like, you can work on that and you can actually, you know, help heal and connect to, say, your healthy feminine energy or your healthy masculine energy, depending on what's necessary in that moment. I actually, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is because in Taylor's album, there is a lot of moving from wounded masculine to wounded feminine. There's a lot of variations in some of these songs. So I wanted to kind of go through the songs, 31 songs, so I'm not gonna be able to break any of them down like too deeply, but I just kind of thought I would kind of go through them and just talk a little bit about the energies of each song. I imagine there's probably going to be a lot of topics I talk about that I already have videos diving into, you can check out, but if there's any either individual song that you'd like me to talk a little bit more about, or if there are any energetics or topics or anything that you want me to do a more in-depth video on, I'll do that. Before I dive into the album, another thing that I want to point out. So after Taylor released the album, she released this kind of, I think it was a YouTube short or something like that, which was a little montage about like the stuff that she's up to now. The video itself was just, you know, it was a little montage of like, oh, Taylor's at the gym, oh, Taylor's baking, Taylor's sewing, Travis giving her a kiss, she's playing tennis, like whatever. It was all this kind of stuff. And I've seen a lot of people like, oh my god, she's in her feminine soft girl era thanks to Travis and all this stuff. And first of all, I thought we were past the idea of believing that anything celebrities share as snippets of their life on social media was actually real. Like, I thought we all were on the same page that this stuff was curated. Like, this was a curated video. I just find it frustrating. For one, I don't want people to think, oh, because she bakes and because she sews, that automatically makes her feminine. Those things are not bad. Like, I love cooking. Like, I have no problem with, you know, women who want to embrace those kind of things that are more traditionally feminine, but they don't inherently make you feminine, okay? Like, your feminine energy comes from something deeper within you. And this goes not just for Taylor, but I think with a lot of the sort of like trad wife content that goes on, because they're doing things or they have a look or something that is innately feminine, people are like, oh my God, they're in their feminine, when it's like, well, maybe they are, maybe they're not, but that doesn't inherently make them feminine because they're doing things that are more traditionally feminine. You can do anything from a more feminine place or from a more masculine place, like anything, like cooking. You can approach cooking from a very masculine place, you can approach cooking from a very feminine place. I have other videos where I get into that, but it's not inherently masculine or feminine to specifically do something. I actually have a video talking about masculine and feminine energies in fitness that actually breaks this down much deeper. Actually, not in this montage video, but because they did show Taylor working out, apparently there was some quote from her trainer that made a comment about Taylor worked so hard in the gym, most people couldn't keep up with her fitness routine. When she's not touring, she's in the gym 6 days a week and she works harder than anybody else. And again, I thought we were past this idea of trying to pretend that celebrities are pro athletes and that that's inherently a good thing. Like, great, Taylor works out, wonderful, working out is great. I think why this bugged me is because this woman is a billionaire. She runs a billion-dollar empire that is solely focused around her. Like, this is like her image and persona is this billion-dollar empire. Yet you're trying to convince me and everybody else that she has time to work out 6 days a week. She has time to cook and sew and have a loving relationship. And it's this, oh, women can do it all. Women can do everything. And it's like, okay, most people can't do everything. And in reality, women shouldn't have to do everything. It shouldn't be required of us as women to have to do it all, to have to do everything. And this idea that women can have it all really just, I mean, that is one of my biggest issues with the feminist movement. I mean, I know that there's pluses and minuses to it, and I have a video talking about feminism, and I'm not going to get into that here. But one of the biggest downfalls, I think, to the feminist movement is this idea that women can have it all. We've told women that they have to have it all, and they have to do it all themselves. And that's too much to ask of any one person, right? So the idea that we're like, hey, you can run this billion-dollar empire, and I'm sure that when you get to have that much money, you have a lot of people that you hire out to do stuff for you, so her day is probably not like the average person. But it does put this idea in people's heads, especially the average person, that's like, oh yeah, no, you should be able to completely 100% financially support yourself and do all the baking and the cooking and sew your own clothes and be able to work out 6 days a week and also have a healthy, loving, passionate relationship where you can always drop everything and be there for your partner and fly to see him do whatever he has to do and all this kind of stuff. Again, I realize that this is just a small montage, but to me, that doesn't really sound like a soft girl life to me. That sounds like a person who's probably doing too much. And again, the montage video, again, it was a curated piece of content. I think Taylor probably shared it because she just shared this very kind of like emotionally draining album, and she wanted fans to know like, hey, I'm okay now. I'm not still in the depths of this misery. And she wants everybody to, you know, at least think that she's okay. I don't know if she really is or not. Like, we don't know what's going on in her head. But she shared this just to kind of be like, hey, I know I shared this like miserable, difficult time in my life with this very emotional album, but I want everybody to know like, hey, this is my life. It's fun. It's okay. It's a complicated message. It's kind of selling you a life that's only possible because she has this billion-dollar empire. It's not exactly the same as the Kardashians, who are selling you this kind of like ultra luxury lifestyle that's unattainable, but it's not exactly different because it's selling you an idea of a life that the average person could never have, but looks attainable because it looks like, well, yeah, I could bake. Yeah, I could learn how to sew. I could have a loving relationship with a man. I could work out. But can I also do all those things and also be this super high achieving, powerful woman? At the end of the day, that's a lot for one person to take on. It's still pushing the unattainable, but almost making it look like it's just attainable enough so you're chasing it, as opposed to, say, like the Kardashians, who are selling you this unattainable lifestyle that's like obvious that people can't attain it, because like, you're gonna have Louis Vuitton trash bags. Most of us are obviously gonna be like, yeah, like we could afford that, sure. And why would we spend our money on that even if we could? So I'm going to go through the songs on the album. I've seen a couple different versions of playlists. I'm going by the one on Spotify because that's how I listen to the album, so that's just what I'm going by. The first song is the first single, which is Fortnight, which she did with Post Malone. I'm not going to dive into it too much, but there is a big theme in this album of like dark feminine energy. She's getting in touch with a lot of darkness. Taylor does actually a lot in her music. For somebody who's sort of very kind of light and sparkly and girly, she does talk a lot about things that are very connected to the dark feminine. Like, I kind of like the idea of like, your wife waters flowers, I want to kill her. That felt very dark feminine to me. Now, dark feminine energy is different than wounded feminine energy. It's also different than things that are like satanic and witchcraft and stuff, and I'm going to dive into that a little bit more in later songs. I have several videos talking about dark feminine energy. I have one that actually describes sort of the difference between dark feminine and just sort of like your traumas and triggers. That video is actually quite popular. A lot of people have said that video is helpful. And I also have a video talking about the dark feminine archetypes, including like the witch archetype, which I know a lot of people accuse Taylor of being, and I'm going to get into that in a later song. I also have the dark feminine guided journal if you want to connect to your own dark feminine energy, which again is not satanic. It's not about like devil worship or anything like that. I just, you know, I thought this was kind of a nice intro to the album because it's a sweet song, but it also, again, she doesn't seem triggered or anything, which is why I think it connects a little bit more to the dark feminine. You know, some of the other songs in the album that I'm going to get into, which are a little bit more into wounding and things like that, feel very like triggered and angry, whereas this one has like a certain calmness about it. And if you're approaching sort of like your dark sides, your shadow energy, things that are a little bit more like taboo, you know, your anger, your sadness, like emotions that are not necessarily considered like good, but you're connecting to them from a way that like you're in control of the emotion isn't controlling you. That tends to be a little bit more of your dark feminine, and I have other videos going into that. But I kind of liked the intro with this song because I think it did kind of set the tone that this is going to be a slightly darker album. Now, the Tortured Poets Department, which is obviously the title song of the album, I'm not going to actually play the songs here because copyright stuff would be a mess. So I encourage you to actually listen to the song. So I'm just going to kind of touch on the energy of the song. This song is clearly about a man who is in very wounded feminine energy. A lot of these like tortured artists tend to be very much in wounded feminine. And Taylor does get in her own wounded feminine at other times. It's not surprising. Anytime you have like a tortured artist, you do tend to find a lot of wounded feminine energy. But in this particular song, and there are several others as well, it does feel to a certain extent like Taylor is now in her wounded masculine, which often comes across as like mothering, not divine mother energy. And I have other videos diving into the difference between divine mother energy and mothering. And you typically as the woman are trying to like save a wounded feminine man. That's usually your wounded masculine, which often presents in women as being very mothering, as feeling like you need to control him and fix him. Now, this dynamic can happen, you know, with any gender. In our society now, it's actually very common for men to be in wounded feminine and women to be in wounded masculine. And this is a common theme that happens throughout a lot of songs in this album. But this one definitely does represent the concept of a man being in very wounded feminine and the woman being in very wounded masculine, of like trying to be the one to save him. She is a little bit in dark feminine as well because she's kind of trying to call him out on it, which calling out a man for his bad behavior or things and actually like kind of basically trying to destroy his ego. Like there's the idea of like we're modern idiots and stuff. When you're a woman who's trying to destroy a man's ego because you want his true self, you're typically in your dark feminine energy. I dive into that more in the video where I talk more about dark feminine energy. But it goes to show like you can be in these different energies just in the course of one situation. My boy only breaks his favorite toys. This album is really about man children. Let's be real. Like there's a lot of stuff in this album about man children and men not being willing to grow up. Typically, when a man is in wounded feminine, you'll often feel like you're dealing with a child, which is one of the reasons why as a woman, when you're in your wounded masculine, because masculine and feminine, like masculine energy and feminine energy, you're going to attract. So if you have somebody in wounded feminine energy, typically somebody in wounded masculine energy is going to be attracted to them, which is why you oftentimes get the wounded feminine man child and the wounded masculine, like mothering, controlling woman, and why they tend to match together. It's going to stay that way until somebody decides to change. Unfortunately for a woman, it's going to be really hard to be the one that changes, because as a woman, we tend to be more responsive because the masculine is supposed to lead. And so if we're as a woman and we're already in wounded masculine, we're already in the lead. So for us to then say, okay, I'm going to stop and let him lead, if he hasn't actually shown that he's capable of being a leader, that's a big leap. It's a big leap for most women, which is why most women are not ones to change. and they wait for a man to change, and if the man doesn't step up and actually heal that part of himself that is actually like in his, you know, man-child wounded feminine, where he's not ready to show up and prove to himself as a leader, the woman is not really going to feel safe to let her guard down and let him lead, because he hasn't shown that he's capable of that. It tends to be a really vicious cycle. Down Bad, I've heard a lot of people talk about this being a really fun song, which is ironic because it's a song about depression, essentially. When you're in depression, you're typically in wounded feminine, so I feel like this is very much Taylor's wounded feminine song. Like, she's actually now in her wounded feminine. She's feeling like she's sort of victimized by her depression. Victimhood is very much tied to wounded feminine. And again, I'm not trying to blame the victim. Like, we all have moments where we're gonna feel like we're victimized by something. We all have moments of depression. This isn't necessarily about shaming people for being in these energies. It's not healthy to stay in your wounding, but we all have our moments where we're like this. We're all human. And this goes for men or women. But again, anytime you find yourself in a very sort of like, you know, wounded, depressed place, you're probably diving more into your wounded feminine. So Long London is actually more about a relationship that's sort of slowly dying off and being conflicted about letting it go. That oftentimes, I mean, it's a natural feminine trait, so I don't necessarily want to say that that's wounded feminine. The feminine does not like endings. The masculine tends to be more about structure, like a solid beginning, a solid end, whereas the feminine tends to always want more. So the feminine tends to not like things to end, because the feminine really is kind of about death and rebirth, which is a common theme that Taylor uses in a lot of her songs. So the feminine really doesn't like things to come to an end. Now, if you're hanging on to something desperately that isn't good for you, I mean, that could be wounded feminine in a sense, because if you're hanging on to abuse, or you're hanging on to being mistreated and you're in your victimhood, if you're hanging on to something because your ego won't let you let go, or your ego won't let you lose control, that tends to be wounded masculine. Again, that can exist in one person. You could be dealing with both of those things in one person. Like, it's not necessarily about having it to be one or the other. And again, this is just about awareness. I don't want people to get too caught up in, oh my God, did I slip into wounded feminine, or did I slip into wounded masculine? It's really just about like being aware in the moment of like, oh, I'm in this relationship, it's not going well, I'm afraid to let it go, and being like, why am I afraid to let it go? Why am I scared to move on? Am I ready to move on? You know, am I staying because I don't feel like I deserve better and I'm okay with being mistreated, or am I hanging on because my ego won't let me admit that this is not working or something? Like, this is really just about awareness. But Daddy, I Love Him. This song actually like really hit me hard, and I've seen a lot of different people kind of interpret this differently. I will admit that on the one hand, I definitely thought this was probably Taylor's team advising her to not get involved with someone who was going to be bad for her image, as well as Taylor being upset with, you know, her fans or people like kind of like making it sound like there's like townspeople, so to speak, that don't like her decisions or are judging her decisions, and she's, you know, again, like she keeps saying, she's willing to burn down her whole life just for this person. And some of that is dark feminine, like that willingness to just sort of like burn everything down because you want to start fresh and start over again. That's a very dark feminine attribute, and it can be positive or it can be negative depending on, you know, how it fits into your life. But again, this does feel like it does have a lot of wounding. Like it's written to feel like this is like a child that is like, I don't care, I'm gonna do this anyway, I don't care what anybody says. It's interesting how I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, Taylor really hates her fans that didn't like her with Matty Healy or whatever. Again, I'm not going to get into like the details about who this is about or whatever. What this felt like to me was something I had to learn a lot in my life. I've been on both sides of this issue, but I'm more often on the side of the person that is giving the advice. But I've learned throughout my life that like people don't want to hear that their relationship is bad or that somebody is bad for them before they're ready to hear it. I mean, I've been like that in the past, but more often than not, I've had to learn with like friendships, because I'm usually the one, at least when I was younger, I was the one that would like tell my friend like, hey, this guy isn't good enough for you, like that you're not being treated well, you deserve to be treated better. And I've lost friendships because of that, and I've had to learn that people aren't really ready to hear that until they're ready to hear it. And so I've learned over the years that, you know, sometimes if you want to maintain a friendship, sometimes you kind of have to let the person figure it out for themselves. And that kind of is what the song sounded like to me a little bit. Like she was having this childish temper tantrum because everybody was telling her that somebody was wrong for her, and she was like, I don't care, I'm willing to destroy everything for this person. And she's mad because she hasn't accepted it yet. And she's probably gonna accept it at some point. Well, maybe she is, maybe she isn't, I don't know. But it kind of felt like that to me. Like, again, she's writing it as if she's this child having a temper tantrum. So I think she's kind of in on the joke, but she's also upset with the people that told her that something was bad for her before she was ready to hear it, is kind of what I interpreted it as. Other people could interpret it differently, but again, it does have an air of dark feminine, but it also has this kind of very wounded. When you have someone who's kind of being a child throwing a temper tantrum, you tend to have somebody who's more in their wounded feminine. But it did also feel very much like she was feeling very constricted by her good girl image, which I think is something that a lot of women can relate to, is because a lot of women get this, not every woman, because I do think that, you know, I've talked about the good girl, bad girl dynamic, and some women actually feel this pressure to be like this, you know, ultra sexually liberated woman. But in Taylor's case, and for a lot of women, there's this pressure to be like the good girl, to always do things like the good way and the right way, and to like never mess up, and to never not be perfect and stuff. And that can wear down on you. And that can actually cause a lot of wounding as well. If you feel like you're like, oh my God, I always have to be this good girl. I always have to be perfect. I can't ever be bad or do something fun, or like I have to maintain this perfect good girl image. And this song also felt like that for me. I think that's where I really resonated with the song when I heard it. Like, I was just kind of like listening to it kind of mesmerized, because I was like, you know, I've always been that, like, you have to be the good girl. Like, you have to be good. You have to be perfect. You have to, like, you know, never act up, never do anything wrong. And at a certain point you feel like, oh my God, yeah, you know what? I'm just willing to just burn everything to the ground because I'm tired of always being good all the time. And that inner conflict can be very exhausting. And I don't necessarily encourage women to just decide to like destroy their whole life, or, you know, just go out and, you know, sleep with hundreds of men. I wouldn't recommend anybody doing that, but there are not hundreds of men that I think deserve access to your body. But, you know, it's one of those things where I think oftentimes as women, we get this feeling of like always needing to be good and perfect and keep up this perfect image. And if you keep putting that pressure on yourself, or keep listening to other people that are putting that pressure on you, eventually you're going to snap, and you're probably going to do something really stupid and crazy and decide to like burn your whole life down. And I don't recommend that you get to that point. Like, I think it's really good to, I mean, this is why I'm a big advocate of tapping into your dark feminine energy, which for me was very healing, because I was very much pressured to be the good girl. And tapping into my dark feminine energy and accepting the dark sides of my personality was something that was a challenge for me. For some people, you might find the opposite of like the pressure to sort of be more of like the edgy bad girl, and you might want to connect to sort of the lightness of your feminine, and that might be a challenge for you. We all have our own challenges. But this song really did feel very much like this, like, I'm so sick and tired of having to be the good girl all the time. I just want to be bad, and why won't everybody just let me be bad, kind of thing. Like, I think that's why it resonated so much with me. Fresh Out the Slammer is obviously about her feeling like she's been imprisoned and feeling like she was very constricted and very controlled, which could be from a past relationship. A lot of people have theorized that that's what it was. When you get someone who is feminine at their core, which Taylor has a lot of wounding. I do think she has a big connection to her masculine energy. You can't be a billionaire and have that kind of big an empire without having a serious connection to your masculine energy. But I do think Taylor is very feminine at her core, at least the way she appears in her writing. That said, if you have someone who is feminine at their core and you try to keep them in a very structured masculine world where they don't feel like they have a place to move, again, it can feel like you're imprisoned. And this is why when I talk about sort of like the concept of a masculine container, which can come from a male partner, or it can come from, you know, anything in your life that is inherently masculine, which most things in our world do tend to be inherently very masculine. The masculine is usually the container and the structure of things. And you want to have a container, a masculine container, that allows the feminine, and this can be even within yourself, that allows the feminine to flow, to have some movement. Whereas if you end up in too constricted and controlling a container, and the feminine doesn't have a place to move and to flow, the feminine is going to feel like they're dying off. They're going to feel like they need to break free. And this can be, in a sense, in a relationship, or this could be even within yourself, or within society, or within any kind of structure. If you have a masculine structure that is so constricting that the feminine can't, you know, have a place to move and flow and like be creative and you know, express herself in you know, whatever way she needs to. I'm talking about promiscuity. A lot of people jump to promiscuity when I talk about that. I'm not talking about like, oh yeah, no, she needs to be able to hook up with whoever she wants. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. But she might respond with something like that, which isn't necessarily healthy, or she might respond with some kind of self-destructive behavior because she's trying desperately to break free from the container. So that's why it's important when you have some kind of a masculine container in your life, some kind of a masculine structure, if you are a feminine being, or even if you're not a feminine being but you want to connect to your feminine energy, if you're a creative of some kind, you need to give yourself some structure, because we all need some kind of structure, or else the feminine's just gonna go wild. You don't want the structure to be so confining that you can't move and you can't flow. You want to be able to have creativity, movement, flow. If you feel like something is actually constricting you, you're either going to die off, or you're going to feel like you need to break free and probably do some pretty self-destructive behaviors. So Fresh Out the Slammer, it does have that sense of like somebody who was a feminine being at their core and just felt too constricted and needed to break free. And it does seem as if they're running off to somebody who may not necessarily be good for them, because they felt so constricted. It's just sort of like they ran to something that may not be healthy for them. Florida is an interesting song. I've seen a lot of people talk about how much they love the song Florida, and at first I was like, okay, I like this. It sounds very dark feminine. I've seen a lot of different theories as to what Taylor's fascination is with Florida. She mentions Florida in Fortnite too, and I've seen a lot of theories. Probably a lot of them are right. The symbolism that I kind of think is probably an aspect to it is, for one, and I actually was shocked how many guys of her sort of like dating history have been British. I think she's trying, because she started out as a country singer, she's trying to reestablish herself as like the all-American girl. So she's making more references to America, kind of like, okay, I'm done with you know, London, against so long London, and I'm gonna come back and I want to be American. And what state right now kind of feels very American. Texas kind of has that all-American, which she does reference in the Florida song, but also like Florida itself is kind of feeling very all-American lately, and that kind of vibe. I also think too, and I'm really shocked that I haven't seen anybody else mention this, is that so much of her music, her songs and everything have been so kind of like London focused, because she was involved with, you know, men who were of London descent and stuff. And again, she has so long London. London is kind of known for being a city that is a little bit more dark, tends to be known for being cloudier, and Florida is the Sunshine State. So as much as the song Florida does feel very dark, and it feels very dark feminine, and I know Taylor has said that she was watching, and it was like a Dateline or a news story or something, where she just was noticing that people, when they just wanted to just like become a new person and change their life, they went to Florida, which makes sense. But I also think too that the contrast between like London, which tends to be known for being cloudier, more overcast, kind of taking things to the Sunshine State, kind of shows like kind of a death and rebirth, like a new, like finding the light. Even though it is a very dark song, I think Florida does feel very dark feminine in its energy. So I don't know, I just noticed that as like kind of a comparison, is like we're going from London and British to then America, and kind of establishing yourself as an American again, but also the idea of like going from kind of like a cloudy London to the Sunshine State. I think that contrast is kind of significant. Guilty as Sin is actually more about like female fantasy. This idea of kind of being with someone but fantasizing about somebody else in your mind, which is oftentimes something, I mean, anybody can experience this. I think it's more common to experience this when you're unhappy with something, either in your relationship or in your life. I could probably do a whole, I don't know if I have a video going into infidelity and the different aspects to infidelity. I might do a video about that if you guys want to hear about it. I'm not gonna dive into that here, but there's a lot of different reasons for infidelity, even like just sort of mental infidelity, fooling around with other people, or imagining fooling around with other people. But this kind of feels more like a person who's in a relationship that isn't feeling like it's going well, and you're starting to fantasize about something else. Whether or not that something else is actually better for you or not better for you is another topic whatsoever. But you know, the feminine, generally speaking, is actually more sexual than the masculine. I have videos talking about feminine sexuality and things like that, so I'm not gonna dive into that here. But the feminine is feeling unfulfilled. I don't want to just say sexually, but like when it comes to joy, passion, pleasure, they will often start fantasizing about those things in their life because they're being deprived of that, because the feminine is passion, pleasure, sensation, sensuality, sexuality. And if the feminine is being cut off from that for whatever reason, she's probably going to start fantasizing about that. in something else. You know, it could be fantasizing about another person. Oftentimes it could be kind of getting yourself like a false sense of joy and pleasure from drugs and alcohol. Taylor does have a lot of alcohol references in this, and has kind of implied she might have a drinking problem, which is very wounded feminine. Any kind of addiction tends to be wounded feminine, generally speaking, and I have a video talking about that, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a future video as well. So yeah, guilty as sin kind of feels a little bit more like that. It's more wounded feminine because it does feel like it's not really necessarily an addiction, but she does seem addicted to thinking about this fantasy, so it does feel very wounded feminine. Who's Afraid of Little Old Me? Oh my god, this song is, I mean, there's been references, I think, to things like witchcraft and things. She has several references to it in this album, but they're accusing Taylor of being a witch and things like that. I want to address this because I do know that, like, when I've made other videos talking about some of like the evils in Hollywood and the industries, a lot of people jump to satanic stuff, witchcraft and stuff. People who practice witchcraft, generally speaking, I mean, I think it depends on what you're doing, but like the Wiccan religion or connecting to like your dark feminine witch archetype, things like that, those are not satanic. When I talk about dark feminine energy, I'm not talking about anything satanic or evil or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. And I think we need to be really careful with that, because I'm not saying there isn't evil in the world and there aren't people that are worshiping Satan or things like that, like whatever. I'm not saying that stuff doesn't exist. But we need to be very careful of labeling everything that isn't sort of like the love and light Christianity or like doesn't fit in with a mainstream religious idea as being satanic. And Taylor has a lot of references here to things that could imply witchcraft, which I think have more to do with the concept of burning someone as a witch who just doesn't fit in with society. I think, I mean, again, I could probably do like a whole video about this entire song, but I would say that this, Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, it really embodies the dark feminine. It's very much a dark feminine energy and the suppression of the dark feminine. It's a great song. Again, I could probably go on all day about it and I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, but Who's Afraid of Little Old Me does feel like very much the embodiment of dark feminine energy and the suppression of it. It's different than devil worship or satanic whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. And I think we need to be really careful of labeling everything that doesn't fit into like the specific feminine love and light aspect as being satanic or devil worship, because we just get into witch hunting, which, you know, is not something that we want to start doing again. I can fix him, no really I can. Again, that really is, it's very similar to Tortured Poets Department. Like, again, it's very much, she's in her wounded masculine, there's a guy in his wounded feminine, and she's like, I can fix him. Anytime you have a woman that's like, no, I can fix him, you're in your wounded masculine of essentially trying to mother or fix a man who's in his wounded feminine, and that's not a healthy place to be in, because it's kind of a recipe for disaster. Love of My Life, Loss of My Life, LOML. That song, again, there's a lot of like, kind of like, you know, buried ghosts, heaven. There's a lot of references to like dying and, you know, rebirth and things like that in this, which, you know, is very symbolic. I think, you know, death and rebirth is very much a very feminine trait. There's a line in here that I thought was really interesting. I thought I was better safe than starry-eyed. The feminine will always seek safety, but unfortunately, if she seeks safety but doesn't feel like she can fully express her full feminine energy in that safety, she's probably going to run to something that feels either more familiar or something that feels more passionate and exciting. In the feminine, there is often that conflict of feeling like you want safety, but you also want like the starry-eyed love, passion, things like that. Similar to the good girl, bad girl thing that goes into the sort of, I would say, like the alpha beta male conflict we have in our society of thinking like, okay, well, are you gonna be with like the safe guy or are you gonna be with like the bad boy? And in reality, as women, in the same way that men are not gonna be satisfied with just a woman who's just the good girl, the virginal wife, or just the girl who is like sexually promiscuous and things like that. Like, again, a man's gonna want long-term, if he's looking for a healthy relationship, a woman who is, you know, a wife, a regal queen, but also has a connection to her sexual energy. A man's gonna want a woman that is able to connect with both, kind of like the good girl and the bad girl. Whereas if a woman is looking for a fulfilling relationship with a man, she's gonna want a man who is a good man, who treats her well, who treats her in a very loving way, who creates that safety for her, but is also a strong, powerful, confident man who can stand up for himself, stand up for her, and be that powerful man, but isn't an asshole about it, right? And that's where you get into this conflict where oftentimes in our society we think that we have to choose between kind of like the two extremes, like the good girl or the bad girl, or like the alpha male or the beta male, or the whatever, you know, the nice guy or the asshole. And in reality, as people, we're not going to be satisfied with either one. You know what I mean? Like, we need someone who embodies both. Men are going to need a woman who can bring sexual energy, but also a woman who holds her body in high regard and values herself enough to not share it with everybody. As women, you're going to want a guy who knows how to be loving and kind to you, but also knows how to, you know, be powerful and strong and protect you when he needs to. Like, you need both in a relationship for most people to be fulfilled. I Can Do It With a Broken Heart could be the wounded masculine woman's theme song. It is such a dedication to a woman who is suppressing her feelings, who is hiding what she's really going through, is ashamed and afraid to express the pain, the trauma, what she's going through in her life, because she needs to keep it together to present to the world that she is this, you know, together woman who can do it all, this powerful woman. I mean, this song, I mean, I know it resonated a lot for me. It just reminded me so much of, I went through this like a horrible breakup, and I was really new to doing stand-up comedy. This was like way back in the day, and like backstage I was a mess. Like, I really do think that most of the people on the show like thought I was not going to be able to do the show. Like, they were literally like kind of like tiptoeing around me because I was just like sitting there like a zombie. Like, I was just like a total mess. And I think people thought I was not going to be able to pull it off. And I went on stage and I was like, put on a show. And the people that didn't know I had gone through a breakup were just sort of like, oh my God, you killed it. Like, an amazing set. Like, it was such a great show. Then I got off stage and I was just kind of like a mess again, you know what I mean? But like, I knew how to turn it on when I was on stage, and I feel like that's a snippet of what most women are going through. Like, they're basically like hiding their feelings and their emotions, because I mean, as much as I understand, like, there's a lot of men who are like, oh, women are allowed to express their emotions and men aren't. Most women are not allowed to express their emotions nearly as much as we need to. And most women are completely cut off from their emotions. And I'm not saying that there's not a lot of pressure on men to suppress their emotions. There absolutely is. But for most women, the depths of our emotions are something that most women are never allowed to truly tap into. And there's so much emotion that so many women are keeping hidden and suppressed because our society is forcing women to feel like they have to keep it together. And granted, there are times when that's necessary. However, if you as a woman never let yourself express your emotions, move through your emotions, feel your emotions, it's gonna back up on you, and you're gonna probably end up with some pretty serious health problems as a result. I would actually argue that the vast majority of the health problems we're seeing in women today is because they're not actually being allowed to express their emotions, and they're covering up things that they just don't want to deal with in life. And this song is like the theme song for that. The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived is just, it's a petty song. Like, it's just like petty anger, and I'm here for it. Because I feel like sometimes you need to do that. Like, sometimes you just need to get that like pettiness and anger and whatever just out of your system. And it is what it is, you know? I mean, I'd say a lot of this album for Taylor was probably like her doing shadow work, which you're not familiar with shadow work. I think I've touched on that in my Dark Feminine Energy video. I could talk about that in another video if you want me to dive into it. But sometimes you just kind of got to write something. I know I was dealing with a situation with some people that it was just really getting under my skin, and I wrote a poem about it that I don't know if I would ever share with anyone because it's like really dark and like really depressing, and I don't know, I probably could be committed if I ever shared it. But it was just what I was going through at the time, and sometimes that can be very therapeutic, and we don't all have a platform like Taylor to just like put that out there to the world. But I think sometimes like you just need to have that petty, like, you know what, like, I just want to make this song and I just want to do this because I just want to hurt this person. And, you know, is it wounded? Probably. Yeah. I mean, anytime you're kind of like outwardly trying to hurt someone else, you're probably in wounded masculine, which she probably got to that point because, again, like, it seems like a lot of the relationship with this person was she was in wounded masculine, needing to control him and trying to fix him, and he was in very wounded feminine. And I think this was her like breaking point of like, you know what, I'm so much in my wounded masculine and I'm so frustrated with you that I've snapped, and now I want to hurt you. Not healthy by any means. It is kind of entertaining though, not gonna lie. Just writing a mean song about somebody is, you know, probably a pretty tame way of you know, trying to hurt them, as opposed to like not actually like physically trying to hurt them. Okay, The Alchemy. That's our first song that most people think is about Travis Kelce, and I just want to say there's two songs on here that are pretty clearly about Travis Kelce. If you're wondering what my feelings are about Taylor and Travis, I have 2 videos talking about Taylor and Travis. This album and these songs do not change my opinion of Taylor and Travis and that this is a PR relationship. I mean, they may actually be hooking up or whatever. I don't believe that this is like just like the 2 of them fell in love and this is like happily ever after. I believe this is a PR thing and this just solidified it for me. I mean, granted, she's had a lot of football references like Endgame, and in some of her even her older albums she's had more sort of like football game references and stuff, so it's not totally out of the blue. Okay, first of all, here's the thing. She would have to have added the songs about Travis more last minute because at least publicly she's only been dating him since like last July. Some of these football references do, I mean, she doesn't mention the Super Bowl, but she kind of talks about like the big game and the underdogs and things like that, kind of as if this was something that happened after the Super Bowl. If it seemed like she wrote it before the Super Bowl, that meant that she would have known how the Super Bowl was gonna go, and was the Super Bowl fixed or was it not? Who knows? I talk about that in another video, but she obviously had to make it seem like she didn't know whether she knew or not. It doesn't change my point of view. If anything, it solidifies my point of view that this is a fake relationship, and also my views on the fact that I think Travis is kind of just a grown child. Is he a grown child in the same way that it appears like the other men she's talking about, probably Matty, Healy? Again, this isn't really about speculating about that kind of stuff, but like it does feel like it's different, like a different kind of wounded feminine. But Travis does seem very wounded feminine to me in the sense that he's a child, very childish. The songs about him feel very childish. I'll get into the other one in a minute, which is even worse. And granted, you know, a guy who is sort of like a rock star into drugs and self-destructive behavior and things, and like in that kind of a wounded feminine can feel a little bit different than a guy who's kind of like a football bro who basically just sort of still acts like he's like a college frat boy. Like that can feel different, but it's still a grown man acting like a child and being in his wounded feminine. And again, I've said this before, like the fact that people act like Travis holding the door for her or, you know, helping her out of the car and stuff is like, oh my god, he's such a gentleman, it's so great. It just goes to show how low the bar is. It's like he holds the door for her and offers his hand while she gets out of the car, and everybody thinks he's the greatest man alive. It's just like, oh my god, ladies, the bar is in hell. Like, it's just, he should do that. Like, men should do that anyway, like regardless. And I know there's a lot of guys like, I want the credit for it. I used to feel that way when I was younger. I used to be like, yes, men need positive reinforcement for stuff. I'm at an age now where I'm like, no, like, you guys are not dogs. We have to keep training you our whole life in order to be a decent human being. You're not worth it. I have 2 other videos talking about Taylor and Travis. My update is this does not make me change my opinion of their relationship, and it even solidifies it. It even solidifies it to the point where, and again, I didn't want to get into gossip or celebrity gossip in this, but I did actually read in the timeline of supposedly when Taylor first met Matty Healy, and we don't know if they actually dated or what their situation was, but not too long after their kind of initial interaction, Taylor started dating Calvin Harris, who was still British. She was born in the UK, I'm pretty sure. Tall guy, much more kind of like classically handsome guy, like not kind of your effeminate rocker, which the effeminate rocker guy tends, I feel like, is kind of more her type. That was the Harry Styles thing. Like, I mean, John Mayer. Taylor seems to have a thing for guys who are probably in the closet, because I've heard a lot of rumors about John Mayer. I'm hearing a lot of stuff about Jake Gyllenhaal. I don't really buy Harry Styles as straight, but maybe he is, I don't know. He publicly is, I don't know. And yeah, so I feel like Calvin Harris was kind of like a, like, oh, I can date this more like classically handsome, tall guy, maybe to make Matty Healy jealous. And that now Taylor's got this whole album where she's basically like obviously trying to get under Matty Healy's skin, and she's trying to call him out, make him feel bad. Like, this is kind of like, I'm done with this. And she's got Travis, again, tall, he's American, more classically handsome. And one of her songs, I forget, she has a reference to one of her exes. We're assuming about Matty Healy, we're not really sure, about her being like his American dream. I forget which song that was. Now she's with this kind of like all-American football guy. Again, I was totally convinced, and I mentioned this in my other videos, that Travis is just using Taylor because he's trying to be the next The Rock. His PR team has basically said he's trying to be the next The Rock. So he's trying to get like mainstream Hollywood fame. His team has insisted that Taylor was not part of that plan. I don't buy that for 1 second. I fully believe that Travis was using Taylor to like elevate his celebrity, and I've talked about that in the other video. This album makes me believe that Taylor is definitely also using Travis, probably to piss off an ex and be like, hey, yeah, you're this like British rocker, not very tall, you're a small guy and, you know, literally smallest man in the world, and I can be with this like tall, manly looking, like American football guy, so I can be the all-American couple that is something you couldn't give me. Like, I think this is like Taylor's revenge mode on an ex. And it's Travis's like PR, like I'm gonna try to be a bigger celebrity and use Taylor's celebrity to elevate mine. I know people are gonna say Travis was already a celebrity, Travis was a football celebrity, Travis is going for mainstream, like mega celebrity is what he's going for, and Taylor's gonna get him there. And I think he also, I've mentioned this before, sees his brother with the kind of the all-American family and getting that attention. And so Travis is now, because we all know Taylor is not Travis's type from the past. This is Travis like, hey, this is I can be the all-American family too and have a woman who elevates my celebrity. Taylor is like, oh, I can be the all-American girl. I'm gonna piss off my British ex, like it said, the blokes on the benches. That line I actually did kind of like, because again, I didn't realize how many of Taylor's exes were actually British. Like, I didn't really even think about that necessarily until this album, where I'm like, wow, yeah, like all of her exes pretty much, except for John Mayer and Jake Gyllenhaal, most of her public exes have been British. So the blokes on the benches was kind of a cool line, but yeah, I think she had to throw in these kind of songs about Travis for the people that she knew wanted to hear them. To me, they feel a little bit more like afterthoughts. They're not that deep. I think it's going to be a similar thing where like she doesn't have a lot of deep songs about Calvin Harris, again, because it was kind of like, it was really for image as opposed to for the relationship. Just my thought. Clara Bow. This song is not a bad song. I'm just gonna touch on it a little bit because this song was just kind of a disappointment to me, because if any of you have been following along with me for like a long time, you know I started this channel because I'm a big like old Hollywood like starlet buff. I didn't know a ton about Clara Bow. I knew who she was and I knew like a little bit of her story, but not a ton. And so I saw the name of the song and I was just like, oh my god, this is gonna be so good. Like, I really anticipated loving the song, and it's like a good song, but it's not about Clara Bow. But I do love the fact that this song is getting people to look up more about Clara Bow and know more of her story. I actually just watched a documentary about her, which I found very interesting, about her kind of rise and fall of fame and stuff. I just found here on YouTube for free if you want to check it out. So it got me learning more, which I'd love to do, about like an old Hollywood starlet and stuff. It just kind of, I don't know, I just feel like the title of the song for me set it up, so I was just sort of like, oh my god. And then the song itself is good, it just, I don't think it was ever going to be as good as I kind of like hoped it was going to be. But it is a bit about like beauty kind of being both a blessing and a curse, and being an it girl being like a great thing, but it can also be challenging and difficult, which is something that, you know, I think that most women, even women who are not sort of famous it girls, can probably somewhat relate to. I have a lot of videos talking about kind of like the ups and downs of pretty privilege. My video about Megan Fox I think probably dives into this the best. So yeah, I would check that out for more kind of detail about kind of the blessings and curses of beauty. The Black Dog was actually, you know, I enjoyed the song. I do think it was kind of obviously like a breakup song, and kind of imagining like a longing after a breakup, and you know, the idea of a person that you were in love with being with someone else, which is, you know, obviously something that most people can relate to. I think especially someone who's feminine at their core can often, you know, again, the feminine doesn't like endings to things. Even in men, if they are having a hard time like letting go of a relationship, that tends to be more their feminine energy, kind of longing for more of a person. I will admit the lines about like the new girl being too young to know the lyrics to the songs and stuff, that is kind of a theme, I think, with Taylor too, again, because she's dated a lot of men who are quite a bit older than her, and some guys who are her age, and I know she's also gotten criticism for dating guys who are a little bit younger than her. And it kind of reminded me of the line from All Too Well, where it's like, you know, like you get older but your lovers stay my age or something. It's kind of that concept of, it didn't work out with me, so you're just gonna trade me in for somebody younger, which is probably something I think a lot of women can relate to in a way. I'm Gonna Get You Back is kind of interesting because I feel like it's Taylor dancing between like, am I gonna be the light feminine or am I gonna be the dark feminine? Like, am I gonna be the one who becomes like your wife, or am I gonna be the girl who smashes up your bike? Like, am I gonna be the one to like be the love of your life, or am I gonna be the one who just like destroys your whole life? And I kind of like that, because I do feel like that's a big conflict in a lot of women, is because a lot of women have that pressure to feel like, am I gonna be the good girl or am I gonna be the bad girl? Am I gonna be in my light feminine feminine or am I going to be in my dark feminine? And at the end of the day, as women, it's really better for us to be able to connect to both. And I kind of feel like this song kind of does a really good job of kind of showing that conflict. Like, am I going to be your dream girl or am I going to be your nightmare kind of thing? The Albatross, very dark feminine. Very dark feminine energy in the Albatross. Listen to it. There's definitely a lot of dark feminine themes in that song. Okay, Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus. That's a mouthful right there. This song does kind of feel a little bit more, I'm going back because I'm starting to forget the songs because there've been so many. It has a lot of dark feminine to it. It also, like, the concept of like, you want to break my cold, cold heart. It's kind of giving off like there being a heart blockage there. Like somebody who's already kind of closed off to love, somebody which tends to be very wounded masculine. Just say I loved you the way you were. If you want to tear my world apart, just say you've always wondered. There's a lot of like thinking about the past, about who she used to be like before she kind of had her heart blocked and stuff, which very often is like, you get that I think oftentimes with a feminine woman who, like, the feminine is love, it is heart. And if you feel like you've been blocked off to that and like, it's like, okay, who I was before I was so blocked off from love, and like back when I used to be this sort of open-hearted feminine woman and now I have this cold heart, and like, did this man love me more the way I was, and that would break my heart if he would love me more before as opposed to who I am now. There's definitely some like a feminine core being having issues with her wounded masculine energy, her masculine shield coming up. Usually when we're talking about a cold heart, you tend to be talking about somebody with a masculine shield. How Did It End is kind of talking more about the like death of a relationship. Not that surprising, it's a breakup album. So High School, most people believe, is about Travis Kelce. Again, it boggles my mind. Like, again, I'm all for, you know, like a fun kind of cheesy song. Like, I like, you know, cheese. I like corny humor and everything. It's just like, I get that it's kind of meant to be like a cheesy song or like a relationship that feels like it's in high school. Somebody compared it to like Katy Perry's Teenage Dream, which, as much as I do think that Taylor's a better songwriter than Katy Perry, I think Teenage Dream's a better song than this for sure. So High School, to me, again, it solidifies the fact that Travis Kelce is basically a man-child. You know, if Taylor wants to heal her wounded masculine energy and not feel like she has to mother someone, doesn't seem like Travis Kelce's the guy that's gonna do that. Even if she is kind of like, hey, this is fun now, I wanna have a good time, and like, oh, this feels like a high school romance. Now, I will point out, I'm not saying this is Taylor's situation, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, I don't know. But someone like Taylor, we know, especially when she was younger, not necessarily high school, but, you know, her early fame. So, you know, we're talking like, you know, like 19, 20, 21, like kind of her college years, so to speak. She was dating men who were significantly older than her. And she has music talking about like looking back on that now that she's older. I think one of the things that we don't really pay too much attention to is the idea that oftentimes if you're a very young girl and you have much older men who are preying on her, oftentimes that girl then feels like that man kind of stole her childhood, you know, like in the Midnight's album, Give Me Back My Girlhood, It Was Mine First, right? So many women could relate to that line because so many young girls get taken advantage of by older men. And oftentimes those young girls, if you feel like your childhood was stolen from you, it's hard to then grow up. I've heard that argument about some of Taylor's music that like, oh, it seems like, oh, she's 34 years old, why does she still sound like she's writing high school stuff? And I do think that Taylor's music has evolved. Like, I do think it's not as teen pop as it was before, which is normal. She does have a lot of very kind of youthful themes, and again, like, you know, with So High School, it does feel kind of tongue-in-cheek, but Daddy, I Love Him, again, it seems more tongue-in-cheek and stuff. Her topics and things are maturing with her audience. She does have a sound and write in a way that does feel younger. That said, we do know that most celebrities that start out as child stars, and while Taylor wasn't like necessarily like a child, I believe her first album release was at 17. A lot of the people that get famous young tend to be in a very stunted adolescence, and we see it with a lot of celebrities. I mean, Justin Bieber tends to be like that. And I actually have a video coming out talking about the Justin Healy relationship, so that'll be coming soon. It's very common for people when they reach fame at a very young age to kind of get stunted in that way. And that's probably something that's happening with Taylor. I think she probably wants to evolve and grow and with her audience, but she also has a very young audience. And so I don't think it's that surprising that her music tends to sound to a lot of people like it's quite young. And some of these things, like I think So High School, I think probably Daddy I Love Him, are meant to be tongue-in-cheek, but again, So High School and The Alchemy to me feel like last minute additions that she had to throw in because she needed something to be about Travis. And I think some of that is probably a PR move, but I do find it ironic that, and we'll get into, there's another song in here too, but there's a lot of stuff in here about her dealing with a guy who many people believe to be Matty Healy, who like wouldn't grow up, and she's so frustrated that he wouldn't grow up. And then she writes a song that most people think is about her current boyfriend, about him making her feel like they're back in high school. So the guy that she wanted wouldn't grow up. So now she's gonna be in a relationship with a guy where the relationship feels like they're back in high school. Doesn't feel like that's a healthy thing to do as far as I'm concerned. But then again, I don't really think that Taylor and Travis are, even if they are a real relationship, I don't think they're a healthy one. Again, I've said before in other videos, are they gonna get married? Maybe. Are they gonna have a baby? I actually think she might end up announcing whenever her tour is done that the last leg of her tour she's doing pregnant. So many celebrities do that. I feel like she might follow suit. I honestly think they want to have a relationship, they want to have their thing, that's fine, and they're adults, they can do what they want to do. I think if she does get pregnant and she does bring a kid into this, I think it's bad for the kid. They are adults, they can do what they want. It's not my decision. That is one thing though, I think with some of the stuff in the critics, you know, there's this back and forth of like, well, Taylor's an adult, we shouldn't be commenting on her relationship. But at the end of the day, here's the thing, like, yes, she's an adult. We have no say in what her relationship is or what she does or anything. It's not our place to tell her who she can date and who she doesn't date. That said, she is a public figure. If she is going to put this stuff out to the world, people are going to have opinions about it. And at the end of the day, if you don't like the decisions that she's making and you don't like the people that she's associating with, you have every right to not want to consume her content. You have every right to not want to support her album. You have every right to not want to support her as a celebrity or not be a fan of hers anymore if that's what you choose to do. People got really upset about Ariana Grande and her album didn't do all that well because everybody was upset about the relationship she was in. People have a right to do that. People have a right to, if you don't like something Taylor Swift does and you don't want to support her anymore, you have every right to do that. Like, that's part of the deal with celebrity. And you know, so it is a double-edged sword. I mean, should you be spending your life writing, what is it, sanctimonious soliloquies that she'll never read or something? Like, I wouldn't necessarily spend my time doing that if I were you. I don't think that's a good use of your time, but you know, you have every right to not want to support her if she starts acting in a way that you don't like or she's associating with people that you don't like. You have every right to not support her as a celebrity. Should you be spending your time like trolling her online or making hate videos about her? I don't think that's a good use of your time. I think you should celebrate what you love as opposed to trying to highlight what you hate. But that said, you have every right to support a celebrity or not support a celebrity if, you know, depending on whether or not you want to. Like, it's your decision to do that. You can't control what they do in the same way you can't, I mean, you trying to control another celebrity is very much you being in your wounded masculine of trying to control another person, which you can't do. But you can say, okay, if she's doing something or she's, you know, associating with people that I don't like, you have every right to say, I don't want to support her anymore. And that's perfectly okay. You have every right to do that. When I saw I Hate It Here came after So High School, and I knew that So High School was supposedly about Travis, and when I saw that it said I Hate It Here, I thought it was going to be a song about Kansas City. I don't know why. I have nothing personal against Kansas City, but I was just like, oh my god, wouldn't that be ironic if it was a song about Kansas City? It's not. Thank You, Amy, most people believe is about Kim Kardashian. It's funny because a lot of people thought it was a hate song about her, and there definitely is a lot of digs about Kim, but it did for me kind of feel like the conclusion at the end was like, thank you for making me into the person that I am. So I felt like kind of at the end it did feel kind of like a positive song and almost like a, okay, we're like kind of putting an end to that drama, so to speak, was just my take on the whole thing. I Look in People's Windows was actually really, I don't know, I found like there was a lot of layers to that. My first thought, I mean, I know that this is kind of like, you're kind of like looking for a past love or something like that. And I've seen some people online talk about like when you're like neurodivergent or something. I resonated with it on a couple different levels. For one, as someone who has kind of always felt like an outsider. I'm an Enneagram 4, so like I've always felt like I was like an outsider, like observing people, like never like in the club, just kind of always on the outside, like observing. It's probably why I became a stand-up comic back in the day. But like I resonated with it a lot, but I also felt like too there was an aspect of like I Look in People's Windows as almost being like social media, where like in the world of social media we're kind of like always looking in people's windows, like we're always kind of peeking at other people to kind of see what's going on like in their world and in their life. And I yeah, I felt like the song was layered a lot in that way. Like, I don't know, I really kind of got, I'm probably gonna listen to it again. I've only listened to these songs like once or twice, but yeah, it kind of felt like there was a lot of layers to it. Like, there's like looking in people's windows to kind of like see a lost love, but also like people feeling more like they're on the outside looking in, because we're kind of more isolated now than we ever have been in our society. But also on social media, we're always kind of getting a little peek into people's windows and kind of thing. I don't know, it just kind of felt in windows on the computer, which I don't even know if people use Windows anymore, but like, I'm showing my age right now. Do people even use Windows anymore? But like, I mean Windows on the computer. Like, I know people still have windows in their house, like that's where you get sunlight, but like windows on the computer, I don't know, I just thought there's that aspect. Like on the internet, online, you're kind of always looking in people's windows. So yeah, I kind of thought that was kind of like, it just felt like it was like multi-layered in that sense. The prophecy, I think, hits a lot of people really hard, particularly women who have focused on their career so much, and then they're like, they found success, but they're like, but I also want love. Because let's face it, in reality, most women who are feminine at their core, which is most women, are wired for community and connection. And oftentimes women get pushed into this very like, focus on career, focus on, you know, success and power, and they do that. And then they're like, but I still want community and connection. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to want marriage and a family in the traditional sense, but I think oftentimes as women, we get pushed into this very masculine world of like achievements and things like that, and we lose that sense of what we value is connection. When she's like, I don't want money, but I want someone who wants my company, essentially. Like, that's something that a lot of women can relate to, and I could go on a whole tangent. I know this video is already really long, so I'm not going to go on this, but like, there is the idea of, as women, like, it's easy for a woman who's a billionaire to say, I don't want a man who wants money, I want a man who just wants my company. Like, that's an easy thing for a woman who's already a billionaire to say. However, the average woman, if she chooses to say like, okay, I'm not going to focus solely on my career, I'm going to focus on trying to find love and connection with, you know, either another person or something. If you can't find a man who is willing to show up as a provider, then you as the woman still have to be the provider. I mean, again, I could go on and on about the hypocrisy of like the modern dating world, but there's this idea of like, men are like, we don't want a career woman, we want a woman who cares more about the relationship. But then as a man, they're like, well, I don't want a woman who just wants me for my money. It's like, well, how do you expect her to survive? Like, if you want a woman who isn't earning enough money to survive, you have to be the one to earn the money to survive for the both of you, or else she's gonna have a career in order to survive. Like, there's that weird dichotomy of like men expecting women to not need anything because they don't want to provide. So she can provide for herself, but also she can't, like, her providing for herself can't inconvenience him. There's a lot of women out there who I think can relate to this. Like, oh, I made my money and now I want a relationship because I don't need his money now. And that's fine. But there's also the idea that, okay, if you're gonna now focus less on your career and more on your life. Now, obviously, if you already have billions of dollars stacked away, that's, you know, okay, whatever. Taylor doesn't have to worry about money. Taylor probably never has to worry about money a day in her life. For most women, if they decide to put their life and their career and whatever on hold and just focus on a relationship or just focus on family or something, then not needing money, you're probably gonna want a man who's also going to be a provider too. I just, again, I know there's a lot of people who are going to relate to the song The Prophecy, and I'm sure that, you know, there's a lot of women who are in a situation where it's like, okay, I had career, but now I want family, and that's valid. But I also think it's really dangerous for women to start putting out the message that like, oh, I don't want money, I don't want a man with money, I don't care about the money, I care about the company. That's all well and good, but you also need to be able to survive. So as a woman, if you're gonna let go of like, okay, I just want a man I'm compatible with, you gotta be careful you don't end up picking one who can't be a provider if you're now going to sacrifice some of your time and energy from being a provider type of thing. Again, I could probably go off on a whole tangent about that, but for another video. Cassandra's a beautiful song. I actually really love this song. It has a very sort of like witch hunt kind of a vibe to it, kind of trying to kill off the truth teller and things like that. Oh, I really vibed with it. I actually didn't know who Cassandra was at first. Apparently she's tied to Greek mythology. To be honest, the first person that came to my mind was Cassandra Peterson, who is the actress who plays Elvira. Some of you might be too young to know what I'm talking about, but look it up. I actually just read Cassandra Peterson's book about being Elvira and stuff. Highly recommend it. Great book. So I had that kind of like witch image in my mind, kind of like of the Elvira image, but apparently Cassandra was a character from Greek mythology, which you can look up. I won't dive into this here, although I will do a video about it if you want me to dive into it more. But I really love this song because it did have a very like kind of witch hunt kind of aspect. And I do think, to be honest with you, in our society, we're starting to go that way again. We're starting to turn on the witch hunts and stuff, and I think it's a dangerous road to go down, and I could probably go off on that a lot. I have videos talking about like the witch wound and things like that if you want to dive into that more, and I can do more videos about it because it's something I'm very passionate about. 4 more songs to go. Okay, let's get through this. I know this video is probably going to be really long. Now we have Peter. This is actually one of, I think, my favorite songs on the album. Peter is obviously in reference to Peter Pan. I very much resonate with this a lot. I had a comedy bit about Peter Pan and stuff that I wrote like 20 years ago, and I've always used the story as inspiration for a lot of different things. As someone who's dealt with a lot of men who just refuse to grow up, very immature man children, wounded feminine men, Peter Pan is kind of their symbol of people. Yeah, I mentioned Tinkerbell. Personally, I have a strong connection to Tinkerbell. I mentioned her in my Dark Feminine Archetypes video. Taylor has mentioned, like, you know, Peter losing Wendy, kind of the Peter-Wendy dynamic a lot, and I think Peter is very much a reference to, again, a guy who just, you know, refused to grow up and, you know, eventually having to leave that man because he refused to grow up. The fact that she has this album and she's talked about this man who refused to grow up, and that's why the relationship had to end, and now the song that we seem to believe is about her current relationship is called So High School, about her and him kind of being very high school, feels a bit conflicting. Again, new love can feel very like kind of youthful and fun and like, oh, it feels like this like teenage love and whatever. Like that could be exciting, and I understand, like, obviously if she's written a song about Travis, it would have to be new because she really hasn't been with him all that long. But it does feel ironic that, again, she's got so many songs about this past love who just refused to grow up and refused to kind of be an adult and be a man, and eventually she had to leave, and now she's with a new guy, and it's like, oh my god, it feels like we're in high school. Again, it does kind of feel like, you know, she's dealing with a lot of wounded feminine man children, and she's, even if it is kind of this new exciting where she feels like she's also like a youthful teenager, if he continues to be a youthful teenager or like a man child, eventually she will start to feel like, okay, I have to be the adult here, and that's it's gonna kill the sexual attraction. Because if a woman then has to, you know, be in charge and she has to essentially be mothering a man, she's gonna lose sexual attraction for him. So again, love the song Peter and love the like the Peter Pan reference and stuff, but also it does feel a little ironic that she's complaining about an ex not being willing to grow up, but then her current relationship, she's acting like she's in high school with him. Next is The Bolter. I haven't heard that many people talking about this. It's obviously about, I believe, a woman who is like running away from relationships a lot. That tends to be wounded masculine. If you're a woman with a very sort of like wounded masculine shield up, you will tend to run away from committed relationships. The feminine, like especially wounded feminine, will desperately run to a relationship. That's the other extreme. Obviously, if you're in a healthy masculine or feminine energy, you're not gonna like run away or, you know, run to a relationship. You're gonna have a more healthy connection to love and relationships, although the feminine will long for love and connection more than the masculine will. But that said, like if you're feeling like you're always bolting or you're feeling like you're always like chasing, that typically is wounding. And the always like kind of chasing, like trying to latch on to a relationship, even if it's bad for you, that's wounded feminine. If you're running and like bolting constantly from relationships, that tends to be wounded masculine. That's in men or women. There's been debate on the song Robin as to whether or not this is Taylor writing about like a future child or this is Taylor connecting to her inner child. It does have a lot of kind of like childlike references to it. I don't really know, but it does kind of feel like there's some inner child work going on with Taylor on this song. So the manuscript is, I think it's a really good ending to the album because it does feel very reflective. There's been debate as to, you know, if this song is about a particular person or if it's just about her looking back on a lot of past relationships, you know, and various things. I mean, you know, in reality, probably a lot of music in general is probably inspired by a lot of different aspects to your life. You can say, is this song about this person, or is this song about this person, but there's probably bits and pieces of different people that kind of weave through most people's artwork. That's just kind of how it tends to work. But there are some kind of significant things that I wanted to talk about here. Of course, the line, he said that if the sex was half as good as the conversation was, soon they'd be pushing strollers, but soon it was over. It's like obviously somebody who kind of promised her the world and then left, which, you know, is love bombing essentially. But it's very easy for somebody in very wounded feminine, like you get the impression she was quite young, which is very common for young women to be in very wounded feminine. Wounded feminine women tend to be very easily love bombed, I'll put it that way. The age of him, she wished she was 30, so obviously like this is her past relationship where she was younger, he was much older, she wished she was older and closer to his age. And she talked about like, you know, making coffee in the morning with a French press, more sophisticated, like trying to be more adult and stuff. And then afterwards, she only ate kids' cereal. She couldn't sleep unless it was in her mother's bed. Like she was trying so hard to be an adult, and then she ended up like reverting back to childhood, which I think is something that is a common theme in a lot of this. And again, when people start criticizing Taylor for like, oh, she's 34, why doesn't she just grow up? I think oftentimes you get that with women who feel like their childhood was taken away. And I think this is very common. Like, I think a lot of women can relate to this because women today are expected to grow up so quickly. I mean, I definitely have firstborn daughter syndrome, and I think a lot of women do, and whatever, where you feel like you're having to parent your parents, or you're, you know, I don't have siblings, but if you're, you know, having to parent your siblings, or you're having to be the adult, or you're having to be grown up, or like we're teaching young girls to like be grown women so soon, and we're kind of pushing that you need to be an adult, you need to be an adult. I mean, we fetishize the youth, and we fetishize like the little girl aspect of like you still have to look like a little girl, but like you have to act like a grown adult woman, and we push that on women so young. We never expect men to grow up. I mean, men can be large children their whole life, and we think it's entertaining and funny. I went into that when I talked about more about like the Kelce brothers and stuff in that video. We glamorize men who stay grown children, but women get pushed this idea of being older, of being grown up. And then I think sometimes women hit a certain age, 30s, whatever, where they're like, I want to be a kid. I want to find my youth again. Is it particularly healthy? No, but if you do feel like your childhood was robbed from you for whatever reason, it's not uncommon, and maybe not even that unhealthy, to feel like you want to be able to connect with that inner child that you really felt like you never got to live through. Now, again, we still have to, as adults, act like adults, and we still have to do adult things. You know, actually deciding at some point that you need to connect to your inner child. You know, maybe you do just need to eat your favorite kids cereal once in a while or something, just to feel like you're a kid again. You don't want to start doing things that are going to destroy your life, or just start acting like a child and, you know, throwing some kind of a toddler temper tantrum every time something goes wrong. But, you know, learning to connect with that inner child, especially if you feel like you missed out on that, not really a bad thing, you know, like, I don't know, go sit on a swing set, or, you know, pick up maybe a hobby that you loved as a child that you felt like you had to stop doing as an adult, or something like that. Like, that's not really a bad thing, learning to connect with that. And I think, again, obviously in Taylor's case, it's pretty extreme. She became a big star as a teenager, and, you know, probably had to start acting a lot like an adult at such a young age. But, you know, for a lot of women today, we really get robbed of our childhood. We kind of get programmed to be high achieving and to, you know, make it on our own. And, you know, we raise young girls to be better men than we raise young boys. Like, we never really expect boys to grow up and become men. We kind of glamorize the man-child thing, but we expect girls to be grown adults even as children. And so it's not that surprising that there are going to be grown women who are just sort of like, to heck with it, I'm just gonna embrace my girlhood, you know? Okay, so these are all the songs. I know I just touched on them. I know I just kind of like skated through. If you guys want me to do a full breakdown on any of the individual songs or any of the topics, a lot of the topics I mentioned I have other videos talking about. Overall, like, I mean, I enjoyed the album. If you didn't enjoy it, that's fine. Not everybody's going to enjoy everything. I hope you learned something from this video. If you want to go back and any of the songs that, you know, I kind of touched on, the topics, you want to go back and listen to them and like see if you can pick out some of the things that resonate for you. If not, if it's not your thing, if you're not into it, that's cool too. I would encourage you, like, if you really hate this album or you hate Taylor Swift or anything, instead of spending your time like hating on it, just find something you do like and find something you do love and enjoy that. You know what I mean? And spend more time like enjoying what you love instead of like complaining about what you hate. I enjoy Taylor's music, I do. I don't call myself a Swiftie because I don't think of myself as being like a hardcore, like obsessed fan or anything, but I enjoy her music. I'm okay with enjoying her music. I don't have to love everything. I don't have to resonate with everything, but I enjoy it. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this video. Again, if you want me to do a deep dive into any of these individual songs or any topics I mentioned in this video, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I love to hear from you and I love your video suggestions. If you would like to connect your creativity and your creative energy, I have an online course, The Art of Feminine Creativity, if you want to check that out. If you want to connect your dark feminine energy, which again is not satanic, it's not like witchcraft or evil, it's actually like really beneficial for helping you heal a lot of your wounding. It's great for helping you set boundaries, to actually embody your own sovereignty. It's so lovely and healthy, I promise. No devil worship or no satanic and stuff in any of it. I highly recommend you check out the Dark Feminine Guided Journal. You can find that on Amazon, details in the description box below. Also, I know this is called the Tortured Poets Department. I actually have been writing some poetry. It's something I've been playing around with for the past few years, and I've been sharing some of it here on YouTube more recently. I have a poetry playlist if you would like to check out some of my poetry. It's just stuff that, you know, I just kind of write. It's been more therapeutic for me than anything. Yeah, if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.